Hello, thanks for stopping by. This is Prototype for the Xbox 360, and I'm playing this game on an Xbox 360 Slim console. I happen to have the Halo Reach edition of the console, and I love it. I guess the only problem I had is that I got about 10 hours into this one and my save game disappeared. All that work gone in an instant. I was probably 80 or 90% of the way through the upgrades, and the city was infected at about 75%, so I've started over, and I've had to be very careful about my save game. I don't think it's a system issue. It let me install the game in the first place, so I don't know. I have multiple saves, that's for sure. When I come to these reviews, I like to make sure I've played the game enough to give a competent sort of review. For a game like this, we're talking at least 6, 7, 8 hours maybe before I even consider making a video. I need to understand things pretty thoroughly and make sure it's something that I like enough to want to dedicate more time to. In this one, I'm finally back to where I was originally. I guess that's roughly about 10 or so hours into the game. It was a little quicker the second time around. I've gotten a little further, it's good. When you know what to focus on in this game after I sort of practice it for a while, it really helps the game progression. So there are a ton of great Xbox 360 games out there, and they're generally really affordable. We're talking 10 or 15 bucks. This is one of those. You can build a great library these days, really fairly cheap with Xbox 360 games. I didn't pay a lot for this one, and I'm glad I finally popped it in. Prototype was released in 2009 by Activision, and this was one of those games that was made for all the main systems at the time, and there also was a sequel. It's a third-person adventure, and you run around a city. It's basically a superhero game, and it's kind of crossed with the zombie game a little bit. The basic story goes like this. Someone released some sort of a viral agent in the city, in some sort of public place, and it killed a bunch of people. It's taking over the city. Somehow you were infected with, I don't know if it's this virus or another one, but it killed you. And then you came back to life in the morgue. You wake up with no memory, and now you have these crazy superpowers. There are other infected people out in the city, besides the regular sort of meandering zombie-type guys walking around, and you do eventually release one major big bad early on. So, okay, we're at the start of this review. I need to point out one thing. You're playing a hero character in this game, but it needs to be mentioned. You're not a hero. Actually, you are probably supremely evil. Sure, you're killing monsters, and you're killing infected people, but you slaughter regular people and absorb them for life non-stop, and there are no repercussions for that in this game. You're murdering soldiers. They're doing nothing more than performing their job of security. You rip people in half, you slice them apart, you're attacking them with these crazy bioweapons, and they die horrible deaths. Yes, something terrible happened to you, but your solution is to use these powers to murder thousands upon thousands of people. There it is. Now, one weird thing early on. Your sister is involved in this game. We're talking first 5 or 10 minutes. It is total plot convenience. She's just the person that's researching this big bad company that's responsible for this virus thing. You keep going back to her for information, and she just seems to ignore the nature of what you're doing. She never stops and asks, "Hey, did you just murder 50 people outside my building?" She's just a convenient plot device there to do research for you, and I hate it. It's way too obvious. So within the first few minutes of gameplay, I did have 2 basic complaints. They're really nitpicky, but they are complaints for me, and they seemed fixable. But they're in the game, so that's what they are. First, your character wears a leather jacket, and he has this sweatshirt hood pulled up over his head. I think he looks ridiculous. It's like somebody sat down and said, how do we make somebody look super hip and cool? And I guess the hood is supposed to do that? Maybe this is really cool looking for a 12-year-old. But that's not me, and you could easily argue that 12-year-olds should not be playing this game because it is so insanely violent. The second complaint I have is, when you're running and you're jumping, you're sort of smashing the ground beneath you everywhere, whether it's a wall, whether it's the ground. You're breaking up the ground as you run, and it doesn't really seem to matter what height you jump from either. Things are just getting destroyed everywhere. I don't know. It seems to me you should be the easiest person to track on the planet because you have a complete trail of destruction behind you where you're walking. I don't know. Maybe it's because you're getting heavier because you keep absorbing people. I don't know, I think. I don't know. I guess it's kind of clever on paper. It just feels overdone here. It's minor. Now, besides losing the save file for this game, this was a really fun game, especially for the cost. Your powers, they feel really unique. I think that's important to mention. They're organic and your body transforms at will, and you run around smashing and cutting up people. This is not for little kids, of course, but visually it's really neat. It feels like they took a Spider-Man game, or if you've played that PS3 game Infamous, great game, it's just like those, but with lots of gore. It actually feels like it combined a bunch of elements from a bunch of other successful games to create a new experience here. The powers are new, but the overall gameplay is familiar. You're going to find minigames, points of interest, and of course, plenty of power upgrades. The game isn't particularly easy. You have a bunch of powers, and they do get more powerful as you go, but you can still die, for sure. There are going to be some really chaotic levels in this game, and you're going to be forced to develop different tactics using your powers just to beat that particular area. It also took me a little while to realize at first, it's important you're not just using your powers. You're going to sometimes need to pick up a gun or a rocket launcher, or you're going to have to jump in and pilot a tank to just beat a particular zone. This isn't a walk in the park by any means. Now there's an opening training level, which is easy enough, and you run around and button mash. You really mess up stuff in this area, and they give you a decent selection of powers to start. This is you learning the basics of fighting and all the chaos of the game. This game does chaos pretty well, and it's there to get you hooked. Then once you beat that, the game jumps back in time a few weeks, and you've got very few powers to start. Then you build up all that power as you play the game and upgrade. I always appreciate games that sort of do that. They kind of tease you with the power at the beginning, then they make you work for it. Star Wars The Force Unleashed did that, and I thought that worked really well with that. Now, after you get through the basics of the game, it starts with this story. The question becomes, is the story any good? Truthfully, I think it's a middle-of-the-road sort of thing at best. Yeah, your sister is involved from the get-go. That is a total plot convenience that I think is terrible. And you have the good old amnesia, and the game is you relearning what you forgot. I don't know. I think that it's kind of a bummer that they had to do this. It's a little cliche, and the whole sister thing is way too easy of a plot device. You have one basic goal in this game. You're trying to figure out who did this to you and why. The whole game is you killing thousands upon thousands of people to get to that information. We get a decent map screen with this one. Like other games that are similar, you get to see what the entire city looks like. It's open world in terms of what you have in front of you. You get to see where the areas of infection are, you get to see where all the available minigames are, and of course it marks your next destination in the game. We also get a pretty hefty upgrade tree for your powers. And also you don't see everything all at once. When you start the game, you've got certain items that you can see to purchase, even though you don't have the ability to purchase them yet. But sometimes you'll do a minigame and it'll unlock an upgrade, or you'll go through a particular part of the plot and suddenly, well, it gives you a message and says now you have 10 new upgrades you can look at. I really like surprises like that. You also get this sort of memory menu. And what happens is in this game, as you grab people and absorb them, certain people have memories that are important to the story. As you're gathering people, you are basically unlocking these cutscenes that give you bits and pieces of information from different perspectives as to what's actually happening in this story. When you come to this menu, we've got a bunch of neurons connected with neural pathways, and you can navigate through what you've unlocked so far, and you can rewatch these little movies. It's a pretty clever idea, and it's a way to get you different parts of a story from completely different areas that you would not be able to otherwise get. I think it works here. The handling of this game is okay. It's not amazing. The reason I say this is, when you're upgrading your speed and movement abilities after a while, you can get moving so fast, it becomes sometimes difficult to focus on a specific enemy. Or I find myself accidentally running up a wall sometimes that I don't want to run up. That can be a little annoying. The story doesn't do too much for me, but the superpowers are really great at keeping this one going for me. What I really like about it is how great they do chaos. You're going to be on a street, and then half the people are suddenly infected, and everyone's running around everywhere. Suddenly monsters are appearing, then tanks, and then gunfire. It gets crazy. Total carnage. So your powers, like I said, they're organic based, and there are a bunch of them. Some of the more basic ones, you get monster claws. These are great for shredding, cutting people apart, turning people into bloody pieces, and probably good for slicing cheese or trimming hedges. You can unlock a monster whip, and it's useful for getting things that are out of range of what you can get with your claws. Basically, you'll have yourself surrounded at times, maybe by soldiers, and they could be shooting at you. This would be useful to reach them, because you can't get close enough without them hitting you with their bullets. It's not a very far range, but it's definitely useful, and it can also affect a few people at once. I wouldn't call it that great of an area effect power, but it's something you can smack a few people down at once and get them off their feet. That can be really useful. You also get these hammer fists that you can use to smash up tanks or monsters. They have this sort of knockback effect, and you can get a few enemies at once if they're close enough. I think this may be where the matter absorption thing is sort of coming into play. You can punch a monster normally, and it seems to do almost no damage, but as soon as you're using these fists seem to have serious weight behind them. They're all smashy, and you can stun some tougher monsters, so it's kind of fun to bounce around with them. After a while, you'll get a blade-like arm weapon. It does some really great damage, and it can slice things up really good. This is sort of at the stage of the game that I started to feel like I was starting to get things done. I was really progressing. The first time in this game, it took me 5-6 hours to get to this. The second time, after I got my deleted, paying attention to what I was purchasing at what level, I got to this one much quicker, maybe 3 or 4 hours. You can also get these killer spikes that shoot through the ground, and I think these are pretty fun. They'll impale whatever they have in their range, and this can be pretty useful for slowing down some larger monsters. I think this is probably one of the better weapons in the game with the damage and range. You also have a power where you run around absorbing people. You grab them, you absorb them, you get health off of them, and the last person you absorb you can actually shapeshift into. So you're going to grab and absorb tons of people in your adventure, and it happens so much. It's something you get desensitized to. Every time you grab and absorb someone, you are killing and consuming a human being. They're dead. But in this game, shapeshifting is a necessity for infiltration of certain areas and, of course, for escaping. You're being pursued by the military. If you can run out of view of someone and you can transform your character into somebody else, they'll lose track of you. As horrific as this is on paper, it is definitely a clever mechanic, and it's something you'll have to do a lot. You're going to get comfortable with it. It's also important to say, you don't get all these powers from the get-go. You have to purchase these using the experience points you gather along the way. And you're going to want to pay attention to what you're purchasing. First time I made it more difficult on myself when I was playing this game. I didn't open up some of the offensive weapons sooner. I was going for more health and what have you. There are certain things you really got to unlock as soon as you can. You want to make sure you have as many of these weapons available pronto. One of the things I really like about this too is the sheer number of upgrades that are available. You're going to get a bunch of upgrades from the get-go, but then after a while it just unlocks so many more as you go. It's great. With all hero games, there's one thing that's really important to the genre. A movement power of some sort. How does the character actually get around? For me, this is really what separates heroes from normal people. If you think about it, how great would the Hulk be if he was just super strong, but he could only walk as fast as a human or run like a normal person? It would take away so much of the excitement. Here, your transportation power is climbing. You actually run up walls. It's kind of cool. You jump really high, and you can glide. You're going to be running over rooftops non-stop, and you'll be jumping crazy distances from building to building just to get around. It's really fun. And with the upgrades, you get moving faster, and you get moving farther along. So this game is pretty great. They took a bunch of really great mechanics from a bunch of games, and they pulled them all together. It's really grim, and although the story isn't that exciting for me, I'm not that interested in the story. I'm really excited about smashing through all these missions, though. These powers are a lot of fun to play with. They really are. Now, I know there was a Prototype 2. I don't know if I have that one yet, but I might give it a go after I beat this one, if I don't lose my save file again and get frustrated with it. I think it's probably worth a look. This one certainly was. This is a great time. Well, that's all I have today for Prototype for the Xbox 360. If you're interested, please feel free to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you on another video.